Over to you, Charles. You're going to be having 10 minutes of opening statements from Charles and Timothy. And let's enjoy the debate. Thank you so much, the discussion.
All right, guys. I guess we'll start. Sorry for the fact that we're a bit late, but I guess we can start. So, yes, there's so much to talk about. In fact, I want to put my stopwatch on. Yeah. So there's a bit to discuss. And so, like, personally, want to talk about this issue because I feel this is one of the main issues that we see many people either in Africa or I guess in the African diaspora having an issue with the Christian faith because they feel like, oh, if it wasn't for Christianity, colonialism wouldn't have happened. And the transatlantic slave trade, which we'll not necessarily look at today, and many other issues. So I think this is an issue that I would like us to discuss. And I guess not only like secularists should discuss this, also those in the African traditional religions, even Muslims, but I guess for today it's a Christian and secular reflection. And so we want to look at pre-colonial Africa. And so there are even issues I didn't put in the presentation, and I want to see how I'll weave them in, because there's just too much to talk about. So I guess I'm starting with this picture. And I guess as you see here, there's this picture of all these guys who are coming to bring the Christian faith, and it's like they're being shown as saviors, you know, and the Africans are shown as these poor people who need them. So like I just want us to reflect on this a bit. So I guess I'm aware that maybe it's not only Kenyans who are looking at this, but also other Africans, other people from the continent, maybe in the future, who will be watching the recording. And so we have our very first president who didn't, I guess, perceive Christianity as something to be embraced. He said, this is a famous statement, which I probably will be getting back to. When the missionaries arrived, the Africans had the land and the missionaries had the Bible. They taught us how to pray with our eyes closed. When we opened them, they had the land and we had the Bible. And so there's this idea that, oh man, like before Christianity came, we had the land, we were the masters of our own fate. And then now the missionaries came and everything went downhill from there. And so I picked just a few comments on some African leaders. So for example, I saw two African leaders like Kenyatta, never once went to church. Jacob Zuma, who was in fact incarcerated recently, I can't remember whether he's been released or anything, is known to have described the negative influence of Christianity on the otherwise pristinely stellar indigenous African culture. And you know, he's a president from Zanzi who dealt with, or at least was familiar with apartheid and felt its effects. So I guess you could even talk about post-apartheid Africa. And so there are those who have wanted us to look at colonialism as that it was a mission of civilization, spreading Christianity and commerce. So there's this idea called the white man's burden. And I think there's a guy called Kipling. I think I've written it somewhere there. And so there's this idea that the white man felt like he had the burden of civilizing these savage people, and trying to use Christianity to do that and benefiting it. And so seeking the profit of an estate was to better a backward people, anyone who was not white. So that was pretty much what colonialism was. And so I want to look a little bit about the history, but it's unfortunately I didn't put in my presentation, I didn't put a lot about pre-colonial Africa, which I wanted to. And so maybe I'll just say that in passing that in Africa, we had this rich, it wasn't perfect. We had the wars, we had a lot of dangers, but at the same time, we did have great kingdoms like the Great Zimbabwe Kingdom, which had gold. We had Mansa Musa in the Middle Ages. We had the Great Ethiopian Empire of kings who were actually Christian, but I might talk about that a bit later. We had great intellects in North Africa, you know. So I just didn't put those in my presentation, but these are just issues. So there's another picture here now. I'm showing colonizers here coming to do what they thought of as civilizing savages. So like with colonialism, for those who might be unaware of what it is, it started with the Berlin Conference in 1884. And so like there was this justification that Christianity needed to be spread through this way. And so there's this guy called Kipling, I just mentioned him, who was talking about the white man's burden, and talked about your new court silent peoples, half devil and half child. That was the description of black people. And the only reason why our theological views are not as foolish and corrupting as theirs, and that we are not believers in witchcraft, devil worship, and 1,000 other foolish things, is simply because the light of heaven shines upon us. So there was this idea of white supremacy, and that we need to civilize these inferior black savages. And so, in fact, I think I'll come back to this particular. So it seems my slides are not necessarily in order, but Walter Rodney wrote this particular article in Religion Unplugged, and was talking about how Christian missionaries were much part of the colonizing forces, as were the explorers, traders, and soldiers. There may be room for arguing whether in a given colony the missionaries brought other colonialist forces or vice versa, but there's no doubting the fact that missionaries were agents of colonialism in the practical sense, whether or not they saw themselves in that light. And so there's a possibility that Africa, and the reason why this discussion is important is that right now we are in Africa and we are seeing a lot of problems, and I think we need to discuss this. In fact, this is at the beginning of a conversation, because I think there are many Africans who are thinking about these issues, who are wondering, like, is colonialism the reason why we are where we are at? And so European powers caused these domestic African industries were driven out of competition to match. So they, because there was the flooding of African colonies with the European exported goods. And then administrative policies varied between different colonies, and the system of traditional African economies were uprooted and exploited. So like there are those who are seeing like colonialism is the reason like this happened. And so I guess this is more of the colonial era. Like there was anti-colonial rebellion, and I guess we know of the Mau Mau in Kenya, but I want to also focus on others. So like there's this Mwari culture, the cultural symbol of land, spirit mediums, and the first anti-colonial socio-political religious protest of Chimurenga. That is 1896 to 1897. So that early, we already had Africans revolting. And so like we have post-colonial Kenya, which is interesting. I'll talk about Richard Dawkins in this mix, because actually he was born in Kenya, believe it or not. And so he's a Kenyan-born scholar based at Oxford, famous for the God illusion. So in post-colonial Kenya, I guess way beyond independence, we find this emergence of secularism. And so we have, so they say that they have evidence against, the Christian faith. We have also organizations like Fika in Kenya, where people are saying that they don't believe in God. We have this musician, Seun Kuti, who says the only religion in Africa with a unified doctrine is the traditional African religion, and yet it is the evil one. The imported religion do not even accept among themselves what their God says to do or don't do, and they are the good guys. I am happy I am an atheist. So there's now this celebration of atheism, and even there's this guy called Tai Solarin, who's known as a secular humanist in Nigeria, who's done a lot to champion humanism. And so I was trying to see whether there is this, whether colonialism is what has really led to this rise of secularism, or is it really intellectual argumentation? And I also tried to contrast this with Asian colonialism, where we find there's even a rise of Indian nationalism because people want to decolonize. So in Asia, we also see the same thing. We also see people revolting against European colonialism and also Japanese colonialism, because even the Japanese colonized some Asian countries. So I just want to look at this, for example, here. With the time, D.A. Masolo says, it has become evident that the implication of the anti-colonial argument that political freedom is a necessary condition of a society's collective right to self-determine has not become obvious to many as having implications for the freedoms and rights of individuals and groups in a politically liberated state. Instead, the former liberators and protectors of the masses from the ideological and socio-economic apparatuses of the colonial systems have become the new class of persecutors and thieves of the public wealth. So for those who are saying colonialism was the problem, we have the people who used to be freedom fighters became the losers. And so like there's this question, is colonialism really our problem here? You know, but still decolonization is something that Asia and Africa are grappling with, especially Africa. And I guess the question is, people are asking, like why? And it seems like my time is almost up. I don't want it to. So like I'll just rush a bit. Sorry guys, my 10 minutes are already up. So I just wanted to go quickly through this. Christianity was in Africa. Christianity in Africa was not a result of colonialism. So I just want to go quickly here, because we have had Christian activity in Africa, in the Middle East, started in the Middle East, went to Africa, North Africa, went to Egypt, went to Ethiopia, like 1700 years ago. Early church fathers were African, like people like Origen from Alexandria. And so we know Africa always had the Christian faith from its inception. And then there are those who want to use the curse of Ham, that, you know, one of Noah's sons was cursed, and they say that it was Ham, but in reality it was actually Canaan who was cursed. And then everyone has fallen short of the glory of God from Noah's kids. And so that biblical teaching, or it's not even biblical teaching, it's a heresy. It's not even what the Bible says. So the Bible says everybody is sinful. But so from the Jude 3 project, with Lisa Fields and all those, try to talk about how, as much as we need to quote unquote decolonize our theology, we need to hold on to what is statements of faith that have been here for a while.
Spurs are fourth in the league.
Oh,
yeah, fourth in the league. Not playing great football. They haven't played great football today.
I think maybe there's someone who needs to be muted. Sorry about that. Okay. But yeah, so like, and I'm sorry guys, I've taken so long, but I just want to go quickly through all this. So, and I might probably come back to this, but there's this idea that, oh, Africa has had the Christian faith for a long time and we need to keep to that. But then there are also those like Bodi Bokam who are saying like, us trying to persecute white people as the reason for our problems is not helping, because it's constantly saying white people are the problem, they can't be redeemed, and we need a true solution. And so like there are many black voices that we can listen to on this particular issue. And so with regards to decolonizing our theology, or decolonizing anything, we need to realize that just because something comes from a white person doesn't mean it is wrong. What matters is what is objectively true. And so even in this discussion, we need to talk about that. We need to see how we can seek reconciliation, like Desmond Tutu said, praying for forgiveness. And I think the Christian faith is the only one. So where we have sin. So we have the colonizer who was sinful, and we also have those who are colonized who also responded sinfully, and they're separated from God because of their sin, and they need to be brought back through the cross by faith, because none of their good deeds, either of the colonized or the colonizer, can save them. They need someone to save them from their sin. And I know I've gone quickly, but, and I'm sorry I've taken too long. Wow, it seems I had too much to talk about. But so I leave it there, and I think I'll just let Tim join immediately. So Tim, you can share. Hopefully, Tim, you can hear, you can just join.
Oh, I hope my presentation is live. I see I'm live.
Yes, it is.
That's awesome. So thanks for that very insightful, insightful introduction to your presentation. And so I think I should now get started with mine here. Number one, our topic today was pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial reflections in Africa from a Christian and secular perspective. And so my slides I prepared in a way that I was to discuss pre-colonial Africa, how it was, colonialism, when colonialism was introduced, and number 3, when as in today, post-colonialism. How is Africa post-colonial Africa, and what is the influence of colonialism on Africans? And number 1, pre-colonial, and a caveat here, I did not manage to complete the entire presentation, so I only have like 7 slides, I think, which should be enough. Pre-colonial Africa. We have to admit that I started with this quote, and you also cited this quote here. It is attributable to Desmond Tutu. When the missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible, and we had the land. They said to us, "Let us pray." We closed our eyes, and boom, our land was gone. And so let us look at pre-colonial Africa. Number 1, not so much is known about the pre-colonial period in Africa, but we have a lot of archaeological, anthropological history to maybe construct a good picture of what Africa was like before the colonialists came. And we are talking about even before the first white people came, because we do understand that before colonialism, before imperialism in the 19th century, we have slave. We had the North Atlantic slave trade route, and so before colonialism, we still had that. We still had explorers. We still had the slave trade route. And so before that, number 1, we have to note that most pre-colonial African states, they thrived on trade and commerce. That is for sure. We had so many empires and trading communities around Africa that traded goods. They traded ivory. I think that is something we learned in history. And trade and commerce is part of the native African stories. There were trade routes between Africans and even with other continents that have existed into the medieval Europe era. Medieval Europe was like before the 10th century, way long before colonialists even knew about a place called Africa. And this gives a picture of the vibrancy and the growth that we had even before colonialists had thought about stepping foot on Africa or even in other continents beyond Europe. And another thing is that in East Africa, we had the Yao and Kamba and Yamwezi. These were famous long distance traders that practiced their trade all across Africa. And say by the 10th century AD, the Yao and Chewa were exporting ivory and iron to the coastal regions of Africa. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to picture an image of Africa that is not revealed to us by many people today. Pre-colonial Africa was not a state of primitiveness. You get it? It was not about primitiveness or savagery that maybe we are exposed to today, as in we are like, when colonialists came, they were like the liberators, and they were like coming to liberate us from our savagery or our primitive nature. That is not the case, because we do understand how much progress we had made just in tandem with other ancient powers like China, the dynastic China, India, and Japan. All these were huge. They were huge participants in trade, in the Silk trade, and this And this underpins our very importance as a global power even before the 10th century. Even before the Europeans set foot on our soil, we had this much progress, and we had a promising status. And also I was to discuss about free trade. Free trade, we understand that free trade is the epitome of economic progress. If you have free trade, and Africa, as I've cited here, Africa had free trade before colonialism. If you have that, then you can be guaranteed of economic viability in the long run. And number two, the second thing, I hope I have some time, I don't know, why colonialism robbed Africa. Of course, there's so much to say about the nature and intention of colonialism. We may argue a lot about why colonialists came to Africa, or rather imperialism came to Africa. We might argue, and we will say so much, but we do understand that at the bottom of the colonialist quest was for economic value to the Europeans. And I'm so worried, or rather I ask myself very often, why was it that the colonialists sought to practice imperialism on Africa? And according to research, what I've gone through over my life, in my secular life, is that colonialism came in tandem with the missionary culture. But I don't see any place, or rather there is barely any place where missionaries were so vehemently against colonialism and imperial culture. And I'm really worried about what was the mission of these people when they came to Africa. What did they want to do? And what were they advocating for? Are they advocating for moral value or what? Today, it is contended that returning stolen African art would rob European museums of more than half of their art endowment. I think it was in 2018, when Emmanuel Macron, the current president of France, talked about repatriating African art. There was so much opposition in France and in Europe. Opposition against returning these African artifacts. Yes, they are African, they are ours, but there is opposition. And why is that? Art benefits Europe a lot. If you return, you're going to rob hundreds of thousands of, maybe hundreds or thousands of jobs by these art curators and all. And you're going to rob them of their economy, a lot of their endowments, just because you have returned the art to their rightful owners. And why is it so? When the prevailing dialogue today is that colonialism was like came to liberate Africa, yet we have so much progress, documented progress, and even in art today, it is documented in our art that is held in African museums, that we were so much endowed before the Europeans came. What Europeans only had, the one power that Europeans only had, was that they had guns. And why is it that people should be privileged because they had weapons? And okay, more than half a million of such objects, by accounts, more than 90% of all cultural artifacts known to originate in Africa are held in Europe, where they have long seemed destined to remain. More than 90% of African art is held in Europe. And you would ask yourself, if Africa did not have substance by that time, why is it that Europeans sought to steal our art? And so these are the questions that we should be asking, even as we discuss about Christianity and the role that it played. We should not ignore the fact that Europeans robbed us of our economic value, and the fact that the missionaries were not opposed to the same really says a lot about the nature of Christianity in the 19th century and Christianity in imperial Europe. And so I think we are going to discuss about the necessity of colonialism. After all that I have cited here, we ought to ask ourselves, was colonialism necessary? Was it necessary maybe to liberate us and from our savagery and all these stories that are spinned around? The simple answer is no. And also we are going to discuss the ethical and moral implications of colonialism, and especially the mission, because I want to tie it to Christianity, because I see you have delved more into Christianity, and so maybe we'll discuss a lot about the morality of it. I think that is it, and thank you.
Thank you, Tim. That concludes the opening statement session. So right now, I think I'll take it to you, Timothy, to start on the rebut. I mean, on the cross-examination. The cross-examination. So you're going to cross-examine what Charles presented during his opening statement. Then after another 5 minutes, the roles are going to switch. So over to you.
Okay, I got one or two things from Charles' presentation, and Charles said, and I quote, "What matters is what is objectively true." And then you cited religious canons about sin, about the fall of man, and all that. So I'm asking you, do you think your religious perspective is what is objectively true? Because I would like to understand your definition of objectivity, and why you think Christianity is an objective, maybe in an objective standpoint. And number two, I would like to understand the role of colonialism. I would like to understand the role of, or rather the missionary culture in colonialist Europe. And I would also like to see quotes, maybe quotes or documents by missionaries that condemned what is that? Okay, that condemned colonialism and imperialism. I would like to know who was advocating against imperialism, the slavery of the African people, and maybe the robbery of African art and culture. I would like to understand if there were missionaries and other personalities who did that. I think that is all I had for Charles. Other questions will come up.
Oh yeah, and I guess it can even continue being a back and forth, and then so that one question at a time. But yeah, with regards to objective truth, actually, so this is can't come up with a syllogism right now, but what I would say is, it is only if Christianity is true that we can have objective truth. Because what we have on naturalism is that we do not know how the universe got caused, and at the same time, we have an ultimately meaningless universe And then when we die, it won't even matter whether we had this discussion. So on naturalism, we can't even know, there is no such thing as objective truth. And if it was, we couldn't know, because we're just meaningless molecules in motion. But on Christianity, we have this God who has always existed as Father, Son, and Spirit, who creates beings who are personal. And so, and then he creates a universe that can be understood, and of which, even when everyone dies, there'll be life everlasting. And so that worldview, whereby we have this personal creator creating the meaningful universe and meaningful beings to understand the universe, helps us understand what objective truth is. So actually what I meant with that particular quote was that something is true whether it's brought by a nice person or an evil person. So for example, if an evil person teaches me how to derive in calculus or to differentiate, he will be telling me the truth whether they are evil or not. So objective truth is not dependent on the messenger. And on with regards to the missionaries, so it's, I actually personally know a kid of a missionary who I interact with on a weekly basis here in Kenya, and she tells me how her parents opposed missionary colonial activity, and so there were those few missionaries, and so first of all I want to lament. I lament a lot that there are those missionaries who are in cahoots with colonialists to deprive Africans of their worth, but then we have missionaries. Even in Kenya, we have people who are dying in order to give Africans a better life. And they were opposing colonialists. We have people who are opposing, even in apartheid South Africa, we have people who are reformed, who are using the Bible to show the equality of humans. And as well as there are people who are promoting colonialism using the scriptures. And so obviously it was easy for the missionaries to show the equality of Africans with white people using scripture by Galatians 3:28, for example, which says that we are all one in Christ Jesus. So like there were missionaries who opposed colonialism, and that really should be known. And of course there are those who promoted colonialism. And so I think maybe the main question is, does the main question should be, does Christianity promote racism? And then the issue is not. So we can answer it in a way. Oh, sorry, I think I've spoken too long. Sorry for that. But like, yeah, so objective truth is only possible from a Christian standpoint, and there were missionaries who opposed colonialism from a Christian worldview. Okay, I hope. I don't know if, I don't know, Kevin, how you'd want us to continue, whether now I start asking.
Yes, I think we can just go on. You are, according to how my minutes was, you had still 1 minute of the past 5 minute session, so you still have 6 minutes. So I think you can just run the session. You have 6 minutes of this cross-examination left.
Okay, all right. So I guess maybe I could ask something to Timothy.
Sure. Go on.
So Timothy, is colonialism objectively wrong? Yeah, that's that. Maybe you can answer even now, and then we can just go back and forth. You can just answer that now, and then I can proceed with a follow-up. Oh, you are muted.
You're muted.
You're asking if colonialism is objectively wrong.
Yeah.
I think I won't have much to say about that. I would say that colonialism is unethical, or rather immoral.
But it is just, sorry, but it's just that our society thinks it's unethical, but it's not objectively wrong. Is that your position?
Maybe you should define what you mean by objectively wrong.
So by objective wrongness, what I mean is that something is wrong independent of whether anyone thinks it is right. So even if the whole world would think it is right, it would be wrong. Or let's say if colonialism was true or was okay, even if the whole world thought it was wrong, it would still be okay. So that's what I mean by objective. It is irrelevant what anyone thinks about it. It's objective.
And by wrong, do you mean morally
yeah.
upright, right? But
Yeah,
then
yeah.
but then you have to understand that our moral perspectives and values do not derive from objectivity, but from our subjective experiences. That should be like it comes naturally out of our subjective experiences. Our morality is derived from it. It's not about objective nature of the universe or of the natural world.
So what I'm getting from you is that there are no objective moral values and duties that anyone should hold to, right?
I don't think there is.
So the colonialist was not objectively wrong for colonizing Africa and Asia, true or false?
Objectively right and objectively wrong, that I don't think that is good language construction. You're talking
So,
about morally right or morally wrong.
Yeah, and so like if it is just a
So
subjective view, so like if colonialism being immoral is just a subjective viewpoint of our society, why should the colonialist who didn't live in our society care about our feelings right now?
I think we are going now to delve into the perspective of maybe ethics and how you derive your ethical values and perspective. So here we are talking about, maybe let us talk about universal good or universal right and universal wrong instead of objective right and objective wrong, because I don't understand what you mean by objective right and wrong. Here I think we are talking about universal wrong and universal right. So there are some things that are considered universally they are considered unethical, and maybe you find a dictatorship somewhere, maybe in Iran or these very hard dictatorship countries, they practice so. But when you go, maybe you come here to Kenya or you go to any other Western country, they are like they can't even imagine of that happening. So it's about our construction of reality and ethics. It is maybe for them it was not wrong for them, and it depends on you. You can say it wasn't colonialism wasn't wrong, and I'm not going to crucify you. But when you practice something that was close to colonialism today, we have laws that universal laws in maybe Kenya, they apply to the entire country, and those laws will be harsh to you if you practice that which was advocated by the. But if you say that colonialism was okay, I'm not going to prosecute you because that is your opinion. And if I say the same too, that would be my opinion. But if I execute that, I will have a problem with the law. And where does the law come from? Our understanding of our ethical perspectives. I hope I'm a bit clear.
Yeah, I might probably follow up on my rebuttal, but I just wanted to ask one question. Have you seen that there is a distinction between Christianity and colonialism, whereby we have Christianity showing that all are created in God's image, and colonialism saying the opposite? Therefore, colonialism is anti-Christianity.
I don't know, because I'm not very good. I'm not very good in maybe the Bible. I rarely read it, but I think what comes up here in this discussion is the fact that the Bible has. My pastor used to say that long time ago. He used to say that the Bible has an answer for everything, and I think it literally has answers for everything, because you have that one verse that says everyone is equal, neither the Jew, the slave, a woman or whatever. But then you have other verses saying otherwise. So I don't want to get into that, but I don't know if it is anti-colonialism or pro-colonialism, because even in the Old Testament, we had something like that was like ancient Greek. That was like in ancient Greek, where we had people who are maybe born as slaves. There are people who are born as in the aristocracy. In the aristocracy, I think there is this verse in the Bible where maybe if you invade another country, it is prescribed that if you invade another country or another region, you can take people as slaves, and these people will work for you. And it is the same thing that happened in colonialism. Colonialists came with guns. They invaded Africa. They invaded the Americas. They invaded India, and they took advantage of their resources. The same thing as it is described in the Bible. So I don't know which verse you're going to use and which other verse that you're not going to use to certify your perspective of colonialism from the Bible. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that concludes the session for cross-examination. We now get into rebuttals. So we're going to do 5 minutes each. Then you may use that opportunity to finish up on what you had not made on your opening statement. So starting with Charles, then we conclude Timothy. Then after that, we're going to go into Q&A. Over to you, Charles.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot, Timothy. I think it's great that we're having this discussion, because I feel like we don't usually have this discussion. We're just constantly talking about, does God exist, etc., etc. But I think this is very important for Africans to discuss. So there's so much to discuss. I just want to start with what we agree. Believe it or not, there are some things we agree upon. So what do we agree upon? We agree on the fact that there was vibrancy in Africa before colonialism. We had huge kingdoms, and I even mentioned it. We also agree on the fact that Africa was not primitive, that we needed a white savior or something. And so, like, I even agree that these stolen artifacts, they need to be returned. And in fact, I dare say that the Bible says the thief should steal no longer. That's actually a verse from the Bible. So the Bible actually promotes all this. And so maybe I just want to first go through my presentation and touch on topic points that he might have looked into. So the comment that was either from Jomo Kenyatta or Desmond Tutu is not completely accurate, as I've tried to show from my cross-examination, that not all missionaries collaborated with the colonialists. There are missionaries whose work was made difficult because they opposed colonialist activity. And we even have cases in apartheid South Africa, even in Kenya, of missionaries who had it so hard because they decided to help and work with the African to make their lives better. And so I think we are, as I said, we are in agreement on how colonialism might have fractured Africa. But I think, and this is both to the Christian and to the naturalist, I think we also need to find how maybe we could also have issues to blame on why Africa is the way it is, even as we look at post-colonial Africa. I just don't think that there is any good argument for someone who thinks colonialism should be an argument for them to become an atheist. Because I actually wanted to address the issue, first of all, that I was trying to address in the cross-examination, that we do have this philosophy of naturalism, where human beings are nothing more than meaningless molecules in motion in an ultimately meaningless universe. And so there would be no basis for objecting to what any colonialist did, because it's just the opinion of our society that we have agreed that colonialism was bad. But in their society, during their time, colonialism was okay. And so naturalism actually hinders the efforts of the African who wants to see them as valuable, see themselves as valuable. And so on naturalism, we are left with the fact that we're meaningless molecules in motion on a standpoint that many Africans see themselves as not valuable. And so I want to contend that the African actually needs to embrace a Christian worldview whereby they are created fearfully and wonderfully in the image of God, to actually see colonialism as bad, to have objective moral values and duties coming from the objective God, so that they can adequately critique colonialism and propose actual solutions. And so this is why I actually shared issues to do with how, for example, Christianity has been in the continent. And so this issue was also not touched on the cross-examination about Christianity. We've had Christians in the continent for 2,000 years. And so we can't even say that colonialism and Christianity were working hand in hand. As one rapper called Bizzle said, they say that it's a white man's religion caused upon us by the colonialists the slave man invented. And then he said, look at the people in Ethiopia and tell them where they got it, because they got it before any colonialist came. So there's a rapper who said that. And so it's interesting to see that there has been the Christian faith in the continent for this long. And I feel when people are reconciled to God by faith in Christ, they are able to get reconciliation such that, yes, we can seek justice, which we should, on evils done in the African continent, but also we can be reconciled through forgiveness to the colonialist, to the freedom fighters who abandoned us, and to other Africans, so that now we can stop hating one another through tribalism, xenophobia. So I feel Christianity actually gives solutions, but I feel on naturalism, we can't even start condemning. What's the problem with stealing art? It's not objectively wrong. And even you can't even say universally unethical, because when you say universally unethical, you're talking about something that there's a standard. But on naturalism, there is no standard, because there's no way life should be. And so there are other issues that were raised, like on slavery. I'll just touch on the slavery issue very quickly. And we see that the Bible condemns kidnapping in Exodus 20:21. And also we have 1 Timothy 1, you can look it up, which also condemns kidnapping. And the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism was based largely on kidnapping. And so because of that, we find the kind of verses that could be used to promote colonialism would be unfounded. And maybe I can try to answer other issues in the Q&A. I think I'll leave it at that. And maybe Tim can now come with the rebuttal on, so it's the rebuttal on the cross-examination and my presentation and everything else, yeah, for 5 minutes. Yeah. But I'd leave also Kevin to say something. Sorry for taking over your job.
It's okay. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you once again. And maybe let me delve into his misrepresentation, let me call it misrepresentation of the naturalist perspective. The naturalist perspective does not advocate for this thing. Let me read. You said that human beings are nothing more than purposeless molecules in motion in a meaningless universe. Naturalism does not advocate for the same, because I don't know where you get that idea. Maybe you get it from popular culture. But the fact is, there's so much literary work done on the ethics, on naturalism, on justice, right from ancient Greek. You had, I hope you have read, I think maybe, I hope, or I think you have read about Plato and the Republic and Socrates and all these guys from ancient Greek who were among the first to design the institutions of democracy, morality, justice, and fairness. I think what naturalists hold is the fact that morality helps us all, and justice and fairness, it helps us all to flourish as a species. And that is why we advocate for things that lead to ultimate good and well-being of every human being, because we understand that if my friend is flourishing, it is very likely to impact me. But if my country or my friends or my neighbors are fighting, it is very likely to lead to stability around me, and I'm not going to prosper. And that was the basis, and that was the basis behind the very early philosophy on justice and fairness. And it is what naturalists advocates for. It's not about what you're misrepresenting here as being meaningless and purposeless. We give ourselves purpose. We evaluate our environment. We evaluate our culture, our identities, whatever we have in common, in coming to understand that we really need ourselves in order that we may prosper. We don't need division. And that is why I don't advocate for a religious perspective. The thing is that religion will always lead to division. And why is that so? You are advocating for one particular identity that is purportedly greater or more important than the other perspective. Why is there not going to be division? Today, how many religions do we have in the world? And each one of them, they have canonical tales and sayings. Yes, they are very nice saying, as in, I really like the Beatitudes. Yes, they are very good canonical teachings of the same, and it's the same thing. When I studied Zoroastrianism, it was the same thing. They had very good perspectives of life and of people and all this. The same thing as Sikhism and Buddhism and Hinduism. All this they have, and even Islam, they have very good perspectives of humanity. But then the thing is that you are narrowing your perspective only to reflect on your religious affiliation. You're not going to you are not going maybe to force Christianity on everyone, and the very good things about Christianity on everyone. Remember, I'm not delving into the very bad atrocious things that are in the Bible, especially the division that is there, because okay, in the New Testament you have this perspective that maybe other people are welcome to join you. Is it the Gentiles? They are welcome to join you and all that. But in the Old Testament, it's a whole different story. And we have a perspective even in the New Testament, we have a perspective of division, as in, if the other person does not believe the way you are, and the other person does not identify with your principles, this other person is against you in some kind. Like, how do you treat people of the LGBTQ communities? How would you want them to be treated? Because the naturalist perspective, or rather evolutionary biology, has shown us that there could be some genetic factors associated with that identity. But then you want to prescribe a book that says these people should be discriminated against. There are some perspectives in the world that should be discriminated against. I don't think that is a very good universal perspective to approach it. What I think is that what should be universal is all these things that bring benefit, well-being, and health and happiness to all of humanity, or rather to most of humanity, because you cannot maybe certify everyone, but at least bring these things to people, regardless of what they believe, how they identify, where they were born. I think that should be my rebuttal of your perspective on Christianity. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim and Charles, for that awesome session. So we've gone through the opening statement, we've already done the cross-examination, and also we're also now done with the rebuttals. So we're going to start with Q&A, and the first session of the Q&A, the first section that is you asking each other questions. I don't know how long we can do it, Charles. I think 5 or 10 minutes.
You said asking one another questions, or getting?
Yes, I was saying that this first section of the Q&A, you'll be asking each other questions, right? Like for 5 minutes. Then I'll come in with some questions. But before you ask each other questions, I think we can also check. I prepared some few questions for both of you. But I think it's better you can start, then we can get on to when we having everyone. I think I can see there's a guest also, and I think we'll be checking on YouTube whether there's a question there.
Actually, I've seen
yes,
2
there's
questions.
a question. Yes, there's some questions there. So, but before we get to them, I think you can ask each other questions for 5 minutes. In case there's any question that had been missed, then we can get on to the questions from the floor.
I guess like I have plenty of questions. So like I want to understand, like Tim, on naturalism, how is it possible anything can be wrong or right if because life is ultimately meaningless. Like there's no way, there's no getting around that on naturalism. Because when you die, like this whole conversation on colonialism, the whole colonialist history will not even matter when everyone dies. And remember, we're just accidents of the universe. Like there's nothing that purpose for us to come here. If all that is true, like how are we even discussing ethics? Like, where does that even come from? This discussion of ethics from your position.
I would also like to understand from your position why you think. Okay, let me try and rephrase it in this way. You have a perspective. You have a perspective that says, okay, if you belong to this culture, you are super special, and you're going maybe to inherit the richness of maybe the heavens and all these fairies that you are promised after your death. Do you care about what is objectively right, or do you care about your emotional, or rather what is let me not use objective right and wrong, because that phrase I don't think it makes any sense. But let me say, do you care about that which is objectively true of the natural world, or do you want to promote something that maybe you don't have evidence for, but it makes you feel better, and it makes it possible for you to express bigotry towards members of the other communities? What is your yeah?
Or should I answer the question first, or you answer the one I asked? I don't know how we'll do it.
Okay, I think let me just answer. Let me just answer that. The basis behind morality in the naturalist perspective is not we don't advocate for the viewpoint that we are very meaningless, we are unnecessary beings, and all these things that you're trying to load on us here. But we do advocate for justice and fairness and ethics. These are things that they are not. I don't know if you are going to derive anything apart from you, maybe objectively out of another person, or a magical being, or a god, or something like that. These are things that we create as we move on with life. We see it is beneficial. Evolution has taught us to always keep the things that are beneficial to us, and that is how our species has evolved until today. What is beneficial is selected to be continued, but what is not beneficial for the species is maybe like something like slavery. It wasn't beneficial, and it is not beneficial. Was instead of peace, it wasn't beneficial for us. and it is not beneficial, and that is why it is distasteful to so many people. It is the same thing that that does happen. Maybe something like, if something is poisonous, maybe very possibly, if it exists in the natural world, very possibly that thing is going to be very bitter and is not going to be beneficial for you, and that which is beneficial is selected out. That is what we understand from evolution. And so we are actively selecting and actively gauging that which is right for our species, that which is good for our advancement. And it doesn't matter whether you're going to heaven or you're going to hell, or all these stories that are taught in our religious culture. Every religion has some form of hell, some form of divine punishments, and all that. But that should not matter to the fact that we are here, all of us, and we need to be responsible for each other, and for us as a species, we need to help each other to maybe escape the inevitables of life. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, because the 5 minutes are up, I'll just comment on your question quickly. So Christianity is objectively true because we have creation, we have objective moral values and duties, and we have the historical facts of Jesus of Nazareth, where we have the secular historians in the 1st century commenting on the existence of a Jesus. We have conscience. Take note, not consciousness, but conscience, which shows their objective moral values and duties, showing there's an objective moral lawgiver. And we have creation, we have a universe. And we have a universe that needs to be explained.
Please.
And so the creator, moral lawgiver, who has revealed himself historically in the person of Jesus, shows that Christianity is true. But naturalism is shown to be false because it forces conclusions that are inconsistent with naturalism. For example, ultimate meaninglessness and something being wrong. That is contradictory. But maybe I think we should go to the questions of the audience, because we have so many questions, and I think maybe we can comment further on our final statement so that we can at least deal with the questions from YouTube, because I see so many, and we are almost done. So sorry for cutting you short, Tim. But
yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Like it's prudent we also get to the questions on the floor. I know if we get onto yours, we'll need to spend the whole night, and we can't do that in our African debate. So I don't know how it's better we do it. I think, Charles, would you want to just like you read your own question, the question that is towards you, then I don't know whether, Tim, you have access to the YouTube's questions, or you need it to be read to you.
Yes, I can access them. I think there are 3.
So yeah, yeah, exactly. So you just read your own questions so that I don't have to read it, then you read it, then you answer it. So you just get direct to that. So over to you.
Am I the one starting?
Yes,
in fact, I think all the questions.
Yes.
Actually, there is no question on YouTube for me.
Sure. I think Timothy, you can start answering yours, then we'll get questions to Charles later.
Okay, number 1, Timothy, if something cannot be objectively true, objectively wrong, but what can be morally wrong, as you said, how then do you know it is morally wrong if there is not objective standard by which to measure? I don't know what you mean by an objective standard, because objective standard for measuring morality, because what I do know from social psychology is that our morality is dictated by our subjective experiences. Our encounter with empathy, especially empathy, if we are empathetic about a situation, and that is what has been happening from the dawn of humanity, if you are sympathetic about a situation, you're going to want to design that situation in a way that promotes maybe that promotes or rather enables you other people to not experience that situation. If you are hurt by something, and the more people are hurt by something, the same thing happened during slavery. When people came to realize, or rather the Europeans came to realize that Africans were indeed people like them, suffering from the hurts that suffering from the things that were caused on them, and they would cry and they would see they would see how much of a problem it was to them. These people started becoming empathetic to their pains. And not many people were at first. Many people were like, these people should be subjected to slavery. They should be, especially in the southern part of America, they were seen like donkeys. They can be abused the way people want. But as more people became empathetic and books started circulating about how slaves were being beaten, how slaves were being molested, they were being raped, and people began embracing it. And today it is considered like, if maybe I ask you, would say that it is objectively wrong to have a slave and to treat them the way they were treated in America during before the Emancipation Proclamation. If I ask you, would say that it is objectively wrong, but when you get to the root of it, it started with people becoming aware of these issues and becoming sympathetic and empathetic to the problems that African Americans were facing. It has always been so. So I don't know where you want to derive this more objective, morally wrong, and objective, moral wrong. And question number 2, if nothing is objectively evil, then what in your worldview can be used to punish anyone for doing wrong, even in your society? It may be morally wrong to you, but not to them. I would maybe ask you a hypothetical question. Do you think all Christian countries, all countries that maybe are Christian, that are majority Christians, do you think all of them have very similar laws? Do you think all of them have very similar laws and legislation that govern their judicial authority? And if not, how can you explain that? Where did they get laws that do not align with their religious values? And my tip for that is that we design our laws based on what we think is morally right or wrong, based on a universality, or rather a democratic approach. If you say that we need to bring well-being and happiness to everyone, what makes that morally right? Isn't that objectively moral? Objectively moral, I still don't understand you, and maybe you should give us your definition of objective morality, because that is a term that is sprung around and I can't relate with it. I don't even understand it. But if you are saying that we need to bring well-being and happiness, number one, it is for the flourishing of our species. Well-being and happiness will not go wrong anywhere. If you promote well-being and happiness, we are going to be happy. Everyone is going to be happy. If you promote fairness and justice, everyone is going to be happy. And when the country is happy, it flourishes. That is something that you can see in any civilization. When everyone is happy, they flourish. There is no wars. There is not retrogressive laws that maybe promote bigotry and moral injustices across the country. So that is what the flourishing of our species and the goodness of everyone is your basis for advocating for what is just, what is good, what promotes well-being and happiness. I think that is my perspective to it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Charles, you want to respond to Tim's answers?
I think maybe I'll respond maybe in
the closing statement.
Because I see time is quite fast spent. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So I think since it will be prudent that you also have questions to answer, maybe I have this question to you. It is said, I actually read a post from someone who I just saw on LinkedIn. They're saying that in Africa, there's what we call a religious economy and a knowledge economy. I don't know whether you saw that post somehow. Then they're saying that in Africa, instead of us using our brains and using our intellectual capabilities to come up with solutions and innovate and keep up with these countries who are in the knowledge economy, we are busy praying, going to churches and doing all these things of like waiting for like manna to come out from heaven or something of that sort. So he was actually trying to paint a picture that the reason why we are ailing in terms of our African countries economically and also in terms of innovation and all these things is because of having this thing of religiosity. Let's say you're thinking about you can give a pastor this amount, then you can get back tenfold or something of that sort. So, so having painted that picture, in the pre-colonial era, Africans are said to be more enlightened, they are wealthy, they are not really on to these things such as the Bible and everything. And with colonialism also came missionaries and also religiosity and obviously then poverty. So what's your rebuttal to this, to that whole context? Are we in a religious economy? Are we not using our intellect? What's your thought on that? And what's your rebuttal?
Oh yeah, so like I think there are a couple of issues there to discuss. In fact, I think that's the subject of another even debate. But like I think it's important for us to realize that everybody is religious. In fact, I dare say the naturalist is religious because they believe in a natural cause for the universe with no evidence for it, and in ultimate meaninglessness, they're still trying to come up with a standard to live, and despite the fact that when they die, it won't even really matter what we decided. So, but like, so everybody is religious as far as I'm concerned, but I think there's a false dichotomy fallacy. And this is what I mean, that you are either praying for a solution or you're getting innovative solutions. So this is a false dichotomy. And I think Isaac Newton showed this wonderfully in that he wrote the Principia Mathematica. And he was a student of science and also a student of theology. And he was brilliant at both theology and science. And then we come today, and guess what we see today? We have a dude like Francis Collins, who used to be the head of the National Institute of Health. And the dude has written a book called The Language of God, which shows why he became a Christian because of his science. And now he's a proponent of Christianity. And at the same time, he was involved hugely in COVID vaccine production. So like this is a false dichotomy fallacy that I think it is easy to promote with the memes online, but it's harder to substantiate in like an academic discussion. And so like that's why I'm happy we are having this discussion to show these false dichotomy fallacies that are promoted on memes online that we can easily deconstruct so that we have better conversations. But that's all I'll say for that.
Thank you so much. I think that suffices to answer me on that. And I think, which are the countries that have never been colonized in Africa? I think I know of Ethiopia. Which is the other one? Is there another one?
I think it's only Ethiopia. I guess the other one is usually Liberia, but it's because Liberia was the home of freed slaves. So it really doesn't count. I think it's really Ethiopia. Yeah, but yeah.
Okay. So I think that will take me to Tim's question. A question to Tim. So if we look at Ethiopia, let's say in terms of their social, their political status, their economic status, compared to the countries that were colonized, I think you made a statement, I saw it in your slides, and you said, in terms of your verdict on colonialism, it wasn't necessary. And my question is, like, why isn't that the countries like, for example, Ethiopia and Liberia, which we can say who are never colonized, are not like continental powerhouses, like let's say South Africa, which actually have gone through a lot more than many of the other colonized countries. Why aren't we seeing this? Because I think you mentioned a lot on trade. You mentioned about anything that supports an economy of let's say a society. But we are seeing that the countries that were not colonized, they are not really up to the game with regards to in terms of the discussion of Africans and colonialism. What is your rebuttal to that position and to the statement that I've just made?
I'm wondering what you mean by Ethiopia not being an African a powerhouse in economic powerhouse in Africa, when Ethiopia is Addis Ababa is the head of the African Union. Addis Ababa, Ethiopia is so much developed, and one thing that you realize about countries that were not colonized, is not just about development. It is about the distribution of wealth between the poor and the rich, inequality. When you go to South Africa, I don't know if I have time to pull it out, but South Africa, I think it has one of the worst wealth inequalities in the world, because you are citing South Africa. In South Africa, what happens is that, or rather what has been happening is that most of the wealth is held by the rich white South Africans, while the black South Africans, even today, they are still languishing in poverty. You can see it you can just Google South African inequality and you see how much, like, a slum is in this area, there is a slum, in the other adjacent area there are very huge mansions for white South Africans. Colonialism ended in South Africa just in the 1990s. Was it 1992 or something like that? The apartheid rule. And the fact is that most of the gold in South African mines was taken by the white South Africans. And if you want maybe to see countries that were not colonized beyond Africa, you can look at China. China was never colonized. It was never formally colonized. And it has flourished in trade ever since the first century. I really love learning about the dynastic era in China. It has it has produced some of the best painters, some of the best architects in the world. Something like the Great Wall of China, that is just an architectural marvel. And it was never colonized. So we are talking about, if you're going to talk about maybe Ethiopia wasn't colonized and they are not doing good, just look at the headquarters of the African Union is in Ethiopia. If you want to go further than that, just look at maybe China. China was never colonized, and their counterparts India were. And maybe even look at the US. The US fought colonialists in 1700. That is in the 16th century. They fought colonialists then, and ever since then, US has become a colonial power from that independence. They chased away the British crown, and they adopted free trade and democratic principles, and from then they became the powerhouse of in terms of trade, of the world in terms of trade. And if you look at the founding fathers, especially people like Thomas Jefferson, they despised the crown, and they despised the institution of maybe Christianity, of religion, and they wanted only to embrace that which is which brings good for the country, for the nation of America. And these are the things that maybe we may want to ignore, or we want to ignore in order to promote our Christian perspective. But the fact is that if you embrace free trade, if you promote everyone's perspective to trade and grow no matter who they are, whether they are Islam, whether they are Buddhist, whether they belong to the LGBTQ community, if you promote them in a free trade kind of way, and you promote their democratic values and promote ethics for them, let's say, and advocate for equality for everyone, you're going to have a progressive nation where we are not fighting between whose religion, whose God is better, whose God is bigger, and all these. We are only going to fight for the cause of humanity, just one cause for humanity. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll not follow it up with a question because of time, because we need to be winding up. So I think we'll now move on. Thank you so much. Your answers suffices for me. I think we now going to get into the final statements. And I think now we're going to be having 5 minutes each of closing statements. And since I think, who was the last to answer? Timothy. Timothy, you can start off with the closing statements. Over to you. Then Charles, automatically.
Maybe let Charles answer. Maybe let Charles speak a bit before he delivers his closing statement.
Okay. Charles, over to you.
Actually, just wanted to get into the closing statement. Because my closing statement will pretty much epitomize all that I have to say.
Yeah, exactly. That is what you're saying you get into.
Okay. All right. Then just take the 5 minutes to finish off. So I actually have a lot to say, which will take an hour, but I'll do it in 5 minutes. So I think maybe there's some issues we haven't discussed, but I think we have agreed on the fact that Africa was quite strong in pre-colonial times, although we also had our issues. We were selling our own to to slave owners. So we had our issues, but we still were a powerhouse. We have the Zimbabwe Empire, Ethiopian Empire, Mansa Musa, etc. But colonialism, we actually agree that it is something that hurt us a lot. But I just feel like it's only on Christianity where we have objective moral values and duties, whereby we can actually condemn colonialism. But on naturalism, it is just the opinion of our current society that colonialism was wrong. The past society, like most people didn't care about Africans. So colonialism wasn't wrong. So it's just an opinion of our current society. So naturalism can't help Africa with this particular issue of colonialism, because colonialism is not objectively wrong on naturalism. So even the discussion is over. So in fact, there's even no reason to discuss this issue. And so that's why I feel the African needs to abandon naturalism, because the African, there are so many Africans who feel like they are less than. They are less than Asians. They're being mistreated in the Middle East, some of them. Some of them think that whites are better than them. And then you want to give them a worldview that says they are just meaningless molecules in motion, of which when they die, it won't even matter whether they existed or not. And then they are accidents of the universe. As in, I would like, and maybe Tim, maybe you can try in the final statements to help me understand how on naturalism you cannot be consistently a nihilist. Like thinking about naturalism from it to its logical conclusion, you have to become a nihilist, which means everything is ultimately meaningless. As Dostoevsky said, if God does not exist, everything is permissible. And so I feel naturalism is going to hinder us Africans, because we are already trodden down. We have so many issues. We need objective moral values and duties to help us see that, wow, we are created fearfully and wonderfully by a God. And there are objective moral values and duties that we can't attain to. God became a man in the form of flesh, put on the cross took upon himself the sin of both the colonialist and the one who is being colonized, such that both of them can get peace with God and peace with one another, such that not only this is the African getting peace with God, but everyone else. And we are able to work together as a human species, because even science is showing that the whole human race is one. There's no scientific basis for racism. And so the Christian worldview is helping us with that. And so these are the issues that I would really want my naturalist friends to grapple with, that naturalism is hurting us because we are already feeling hopeless. And then we are going to be told that life is ultimately meaningless. We need the Christian worldview. And so just in the few minutes that are left, I wanted to talk about this issue of the colonization that I think we need to talk about more, even in our disagreements, about how there are issues that Africans are struggling with that have nothing to do with colonialism. And it's interesting, we haven't even spoken about Singapore and Malaysia, how Singapore and Malaysia are doing well, yet they were colonized, but we are struggling. And I think that's a discussion for another day. I was hoping that would come in. And then there's also the issue of, Gaddafi was trying to promote a one Africa and then he was annihilated. That's also something people usually like to talk about. And I guess we can't talk about that. But I think this debate was more of a beginning of a discussion. We were not going to finish everything here. There are so many things we need.
I think Charles' connection went down.
I think we lost him.
Sure. I think maybe since he was finishing up, we can move over to you, if I'm not wrong. Then yeah. Then I think when he comes back, if there's anything he had left, he'll finish up with because we are finishing up. So over to you.
Okay, thanks for that opportunity. And Charles is promoting a perspective, the perspective of Christianity that is quite interesting, because when you read, maybe he hasn't read Exodus 21 and maybe Deuteronomy 28, so that he understands how the Bible does condemn, in quotes, condemn slavery. He hasn't read Exodus 21 and Deuteronomy 28, and maybe even the book of Leviticus. Or let him continue. Charles, take over.
Yes, Charles, take over. Finish. I'm still not getting you. Maybe you can unmute, Charles. Okay, I think. Yes, you can unmute.
Guys, having internet trouble. But I think Tim can just finish off. I think I finished the main part that I wanted to tackle. I think he can just finish off with the final statements. Sorry for the internet issues. Oh, Tim, you're muted. You're muted.
Oh, I was saying that you're advocating for the Christian perspective. I don't know if you're advocating for the Judaic perspective or rather just the Christian perspective, because if you are advocating for a biblical perspective to morality, and maybe you haven't read the Torah, especially Deuteronomy 28 and Exodus 21. Maybe you'd get a very different perspective, or rather, if you have read with the Christian, is it the Holy Spirit with you? But if any other person reads that hasn't been exposed to the idea of idea of Christianity, they are going to see it as abhorrent, and it is not going to promote. It is not necessarily meant to promote well-being and to promote goodness of every human being. And so let me close off with saying that it was indeed a very interesting discussion. We could debate and talk about it for 2 days consecutively, but the fact is that we don't have that much time for it. And what I can say is that ethics has been part of humanity from the dawn of ethics has been part of humanity from the dawn of civilization. Humans learned from the caves. They learned to maybe run away from animals. They learned to teach their kids to run away from wild animals. They learned to teach their kids to do the things that are beneficial to their well-being, that will make them live longer. It has been there from the dawn of humanity. And from religious books, we do understand that Hinduism is the earliest ever recorded religious culture. And you have so much of the texts that do promote the things that Christianity does promote. So if you get that idea, even from ancient Greek, I've read a lot about ancient Greek culture that came way before Christianity. You have these principles in place, and they are very very closely related to the Judaic culture. The same thing the Judaic culture is closely related to the Zoroastrian culture. And when you look at it, you see a progression of humanity that really embraces ethics, regardless of their religious affiliation. And these are things that we need to consider. Is it that they were created by God, or rather they were created by people who said they were like maybe who said they were speaking for God, and they were speaking for maybe angels and magical creatures? I think we need to determine whether it is God who wrote them and which God wrote them. The Bhagavad Gita is also said to have been derived from God, and all these things. The same thing as writings by Greek mythologists and teachers. They say they derived it from the Delphi oracle. That was the oracle of Apollo, the god Apollo. And then they were written by humans. And so what we are seeing, or what we are coming with this convergence of religious cultures, we are seeing that in every part of civilization, we have people who emerged, and they wanted to claim authority over others. And so they said, our texts do come from a god, or from these figures, the mythical figures. And when you look at it critically, you are seeing a progression in our knowledge and understanding of the world, whether it is from Hinduism, whether it is from Buddhism, whether it's from Christianity, Zoroastrianism, Islam. We are seeing a progression of our society and embracing the things that promote our well-being as humans. And that is the thing that we need to be really focused on. We don't need to be focused on divisions, as in you are Christian, you are Methodist, I don't know, you belong to Jehovah's Witnesses. We need to embrace a more universalistic perspective. We don't need to be divided as humans. In Ireland, Catholics have been fighting with Anglicans for a very long time and killing each other. We don't need to be subjected to such things. We don't need to be divided, and that's why I advocate for a secular perspective. A secular perspective embraces diversity. And secular doesn't mean atheism. let us be conversant with this term. Secular doesn't mean atheist. We have even secular pastors. You are a pastor and you're secular. Secular doesn't mean atheism. So maybe let us ruminate on that as we close our meeting for another day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a way to end it. Sorry about that. So I think that concludes our discussion. You can see it was a discussion. It was less of a less of a debate and more of a discussion, because we had a lot to agree upon, rather than choose whether we are more of leftists and rightists on the matter of colonialism. Anyway, so that was our discussion on the Christian and naturalistic reflections about the pre-colonial Africa and also the post-colonial. I believe we've just done a tip. Yes, Timothy?
I've raised my hand.
Yes,
I wanted to remind you about something I had raised in the chat. Please remember.
Exactly. Once we end the stream, don't worry, we'll do the edits there. So basically, I believe we've just scratched the surface on this discussion, and most probably very soon we're going to have a part 2 of this, and where we are going to touch more, especially on the many things that both Charles and Tim did not cover. So unless there's anything, I'd like to remind the viewers who are going to be checking this on YouTube to subscribe to the channel. You get notifications anytime we go live on these debates. And as always, you're welcome to share your perspectives, as well as if you'd like to be part of like a speaker or a debater in the next session, you're always welcome to write to us to africandebates@gmail.com. Thank you so much, and have a nice time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for moderating.
You're welcome. Let me end the stream.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. And okay.